Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Healthy Business Podcast. I am joined by the wonderful Vanisha Patel, and we're going to be talking to you about social media. And she is an expert on all things social media, especially from an Instagram perspective. And we're going to be talking about how things are changing super rapidly, what some recent updates are, how you can get the most out of it using video content, which is becoming super key in your marketing strategy on social media. And ultimately, it's about getting more sales. We're all growing a business, and how we use social media should be part of your marketing strategy to ultimately grow your business, but grow your sales as well. So, Vanisha, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to delve into this. And I know it's one question that I always get asked is that kind of, how to use social media, how often you should be in there. So we're going to delve into that, I think, as well. Before we start, though, one question that I always ask my guests is, what does a healthy business mean to you?
Oh, this is a really good question. So, a healthy business to me is having a good work-life balance. I think this is absolutely key because I think when you run your own business, you can easily get caught up in working so many different hours, but it's about having that balance, having those boundaries in place. So, having a healthy business is one where you're working obviously the hours that you want to, but you've got that balance in place where you're spending time with your loved ones, your family, your friends, and you're taking time equally for yourself as well. I think this is one of the most important things that I've learned over the years.
It's so easy, isn't it, to spend all the hours working in your business when actually quite often you set up your own business to have that flexibility, to have that freedom. So, yeah, I love that. It speaks very closely to my heart. But I think leading into that around social media, that has become a massive part of our lives. And, talking about boundaries, talking about, how to have that sort of time off with friends and family. How do you manage that from being a social media strategist to having those boundaries as well?
That's one thing that I used to find really difficult because obviously I'm active on social media myself. Like I take my followers behind the scenes, sharing exactly what I'm up to, what I'm helping my clients with. So by the time, say I'm out with like family and friends, they say to me, "Oh, are you not doing a story or you're not posting?" And I say no, because I like having those boundaries in place and I like having that time off. And before I used to really struggle to actually switch off because the way that social media has grown, it's become part of our lives because, yes, we're showing what happens behind the scenes, but at the same time, we're using it for business as well. So it's good to have those sort of boundaries in place, thinking, right, this is my shut off time from social media, because you can easily just be scrolling through your phone and you don't realize how much time you end up wasting on there.
So interesting, isn't it? Especially when, we're told we should be on social media all the time. We're told that we should be posting behind the scenes, as you were saying. But actually, I think it is that boundary is that people can still know more about you. They can see behind the scenes without you having to be on there all the time. So it's being quite selective, but being quite clever with your time, I guess, as well, isn't it?
And this is one thing that I love to do is having that actual plan in place, thinking, right, how many times do I need to post on social media this week? Maybe it's 3 times a week. Once you've identified when you're going to post, then you know exactly what's going out, whether you're going live, what stories you might be doing. And at least then you know, right, I'm going to be intentional with the time that I am spending because things are planned out. And the way that you plan it out is you think about those goals. What availability do I have? If you're a product based business, what sales do I need to make? Because then by the time you're posting with the right intention, you're posting with purpose. So then you don't have that time to sit there. You can have a little scroll, but then you think, that all those minutes are going to add up. So rather than wasting that time, you think, right, I need to post however many times. The other time I could be working on another part of my business or even spending that time with like family or friends.
So true. And I think it always comes back to what you're selling. And I talk to my clients about this as well, is that you have to know what you're selling because then you can create the marketing content that's going to lead into that sale so that you're not pushing constantly, you're attracting and you're seeding that content, which gets people to want to buy from you or want to get to know you more. Um, Thinking of that, and one of the questions that I tend to get asked a lot is, well, how much do I post? What is the ideal frequency that we should be posting. You sort of mentioned 2 to 3 times a week there. I think people have that assumption that they need to be posting every day and lots of times a day. What are your thoughts around that?
I think it's different for every single individual and business owner. The reason why I say 3 times a week is this is something that I do. However, because of the way that life has gone or things that have happened, like in business, I haven't been able to do that. But normally, I'd post maybe 3 times a week. One thing that I would say is depending on your time available, the schedule that you've got, what time have you got to post? Because if you say to yourself, right, Sarah, I'm going to post every single day, do you have the time to post every single day? Every single day, does that mean you'll show up on video? Does that mean you'll share a carousel post, a graphic based post where you need to be designing all of those things? Because then if you say to yourself, right, that's 7 posts in a week, that's 14 posts in like 2 weeks, but do you have the time available? So I would always think about your time that you've got available. So if that's maybe committing to 2 or 3 times a week, that's completely fine, because then if that's only 3 times a week, you only actually need 12 posts for that month. And when you break it down that way in a realistic way, you reduce that overwhelming feeling. So it's different for each individual. But I'd always say start small, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And then if you think you've got that time available to create that content, then maybe start to increase it.
And it's that consistency, isn't it? Because there's no point in posting like every day for a month and then
Yeah.
disappearing for 2 months. So you want to make sure you've got that consistency, that you, as you say, that you've got that time available, not just to create the content, but actually to think about, why and what you're posting, as well as the images or videos that are going with it. What about scheduling? Do you recommend people schedule posts? So kind of batch creating content and then scheduling things, or what are your thoughts around that?
200%, especially because say you've got a day where you've got back-to-back calls, whatever you're doing, and you don't have that time to manually push a post out. There's nothing wrong with like scheduling it, because at least then that say Monday at 10 o'clock, you're on a meeting, for example, that post will go out for you rather than you having to sit there. So if you do that, it will buy you back so much time.
And it goes back to what you were saying around, planning, knowing what you're selling, because then you can create that content with purpose. You've got that intention there. And it's a lot easier, especially for our brains, the overwhelm side of things, to create all of those posts in one go rather than kind of on a daily basis going, oh my goodness, I know I've got to post something. What am I going to post? And I think that's when the overwhelm kicks in, isn't it?
I know. And I think this is the struggle that a lot of people have. They start with, well, what am I going to post? But one thing that I always say is, what goals are you working towards? Because if you know exactly what you're working towards, it'll be so much easier for you to then create content. And then when you start to create that content, you can even look back to see, right, it's carousel posts that are working well, it's reels that are doing well. So then half the work is already done for you, because one, what goals you're working towards, and two, what kind of content is working well.
And I love what you just said there around the almost kind of alluding to the fact that you need to use your insights, like know what's
Yeah.
working for you, because trends change all the time, and we're going to touch on that. But I think don't just post for the sake of it. Like spend that time looking and seeing what has worked for you previously and do more of what works, because then you're going to get the most traction from it. So how far would you recommend people do sort of batch create or schedule in advance?
I try and do at least a couple of weeks or a month's worth. But again, you don't necessarily need to do that. Say, for example, you start with a week, then I'd highly recommend doing that. And then perhaps you can do 2 weeks, but then don't think that, oh, all of my posts were already planned out. If something changes, that's completely fine. So you've got that flexibility.
Yeah, definitely. And we know life happens, don't we? The media reports very quickly, life can change, the world can change, different news stories. And I think being aware of that, and if you've got some posts coming up that might, trigger people or do something like that, that's okay. But let's just push that and be aware of, of what's going on too. But having that plan gives you that starting point to not have that overwhelm, which is just, yeah, I find it incredible to do. It just makes life so much easier.
And especially now, because obviously the kids will be breaking up for the summer, thinking about what have you got coming up in the next sort of couple of months. Are there any sort of big holidays that you've got planned? Have you got anything in your business? Because if you start planning it in such a way that you know exactly what's coming up, you start planning out those posts, it'll make your life so much easier. Because say you've got 12 posts you want to plan out, you might even have half the work done, because you know exactly what you're going to be talking about, because you know what you've got coming up, both personally and in your business as well.
Yeah, and it's that visibility, isn't it? It goes back to that consistency, that visibility, that it's okay to take time out. In fact, as a business owner, that's the whole point, is that you can take time out and have that flexibility. So knowing that you are visible, knowing that you've got that presence for your audience without having that overwhelm, for me is and certainly was when I first started, a complete game changer.
And I know that one thing that does come up a lot is individuals actually thinking, but I need to show up every single day. Oh, but this has happened, but you don't necessarily need to. But if you are visible, like say more or less, I don't know, even once a week, and you're consistent, don't worry about those times where you're not active, because you don't need to be active necessarily all the time.
Yeah, definitely. And in some ways, that creates a bit of intrigue as well, doesn't it? Of kind of people keep looking out for you because they want to know when you are coming back. And I know one of the trends that I've sort of heard recently is that, if you miss a day from stories, then it increases your reach.
Yes, that's right. And just to add to that as well, is if you miss a day on stories, like for example on Instagram, when you do show up on stories, I'd recommend using one of the engagement stickers. So for example, having the poll option, using the quiz, because then if you haven't shown up for an 24-hour period and you show up with an engagement sticker, your audience and your followers will interact, which means the chances of more individuals will see the chances of more individuals seeing that will increase even more so.
Amazing. Great tip there as well. What I'm going to delve into this a bit more, I think, because, the world of social media changes so quickly. What are the current trends that are working really well for people? So we've talked about people being intentional, posting with purpose. What should they be focusing on?
One thing that I've seen increase a lot is authenticity. So this is what more and more people want to see at the moment. So, not sharing filters all the time, actually showing what's happening behind the scenes, because people want to be able to see that. People relate to people. People buy into people. Like, when you share that real, vulnerable side to you, that is what will draw other people in. And the more that you're doing these things, it's going to be memorable and it's going to be relatable. So, yes, I mentioned before we use it for our businesses, but we also use it personally. And this is what people want to see. They don't necessarily want to see, oh, it's 7 a.m. on a Monday morning. I've done this, this, and this. Everything is perfect. When in reality, it's not. And that's what people want to see. The more that you start doing these things, they'll buy into you and it's really memorable as well.
So it's almost that, not just using the filters or kind of avoiding those, but actually filtering your life to a certain extent as well, and not just showing the, beautiful images, and it's sharing the real life behind the scenes too.
Exactly. And another thing that's growing at the moment, I think it's just going to continue to grow, is the use of video. So going live and even the use of reels, of TikTok videos, because the way that we're consuming information now is changing to what it was before. So say, for example, you pull up Instagram on your phone, people are just scrolling through. So it's like, how can you use reels in order to capture someone's attention within the first, I'd say 3 seconds? Because if you can do that, they'll think, oh, Sarah's just shared an incredible reel. And then whoever it is more likely to consume the rest of your content thinking, oh, this is what she does. How can I potentially work with her?
And it's amazing, isn't it? Like, you have to capture people's attention within that first 3 seconds. Otherwise, that thumb is just scrolling.
And imagine, and I've done this to so many individuals where you see one video, like say, for example, it's a reel, you think, oh, this is so much fun. What else have they done? So imagine just by doing that with a short, snappy video, how can you grab the attention? And I always call it like a scroll stopping image, a scroll stopping reel. Like, how can you do that just to grab the attention of your follower and your audience?
And what is working for that? Is it, people I think are a little bit afraid of doing the reels where they're dancing or they're doing the kind of pointing in different directions. Is that something that is trending, or are there kind of, I know there are lots of other ways of kind of doing reels as well, but what is, people are kind of worried or not sure where to start with reels. What are you recommending at the moment?
People are still doing that, but you've got to know that you don't necessarily need to show your face, even if it's a collection of pre-recorded images or videos on your phone. If they're short, they're snappy, they're quick, and it's the audio. If you've got that right audio, which is like something that's fun, it's memorable, and that grabs the attention, you don't necessarily need to show your face. It could just be something where you're taking your audience behind the scenes with you. It could be taking them from one place to another, like a day in the life of Vanisha. scene one, this is what I'm doing, scene two, this is what I'm up to. And I don't necessarily need to be showing my face, but I can show those different elements and part of my day, because you're taking your audience on that journey with you, and this is what they like to see.
I love that idea of kind of doing a day in the life reel of just, it's an easy way to show people what the behind the scenes are with, as you say, without having to show your face that people are kind of quite nervous about, especially when they're sort of first starting out. I know that's one of the big things when it comes to video and visibility is people are like, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure I feel comfortable yet. So that's a great way of just, getting out there and getting into reels and video without having to be visually visible.
Exactly. And that's how you'll slowly start to build up your confidence. And even if you do like a day in the life of, you can share something like, my morning routine. So you could show a little video clip of like your book that you're reading. Your next one could be, getting ready for the day. You've got your planner out. Third one could be like with your laptop ready. So you're not actually showing your face, but you're showing those different parts. So then straight away, your audience will think, oh, what is she up to now? What is she doing now? Like, what is she working on?
Such a great idea. And from a live perspective, so from videos, one of the things that I found with my Instagram most recently is that, it's the replays, isn't it? It's the, people are watching on the replay. They don't necessarily kind of watching you live. And I think that can put people sometimes off because they're like, well, no one's turning up to watch me live. I'm just not going to bother. But actually it's the replays, the recordings that people are kind of navigating to as well, right?
And especially now, like obviously everyone is busy. And if, say, for example, we touched upon consistency before, if you plan to go live at a certain time, like say, for example, every single month, every single week, people know that, right, on a Tuesday at 8 p.m., Vanisha is going live. If I miss that, then I can always watch it back on the replay. And some people think, oh, I'm going live. Nobody's watching me. That is okay, because what you'll find is a lot of people might be working, they might be in the middle of something, and more often than not, sometimes I'll watch something and I say, oh, Sarah's just gone live. However, I can't watch that now because I'm in the middle of something else. I'll always make a note of it saying watch back on the replay, and just know that it's okay, because what a lot of people think, oh, I'm live, one person's joining me, nobody's joining me, but that's okay. Don't get caught up on the numbers. You can always watch back on the replay. And I find a lot of my followers tend to do that anyway.
Yeah, and it's that consistency, isn't it? People get used to you showing up at a certain time. And then they start remembering that and they start tuning into it. But you have to give it a bit of time for that to kind of get, that consistency to settle in as well.
Exactly. And I think this is the problem that people have. They think, right, I've gone live once, twice, maybe over the next, the last couple of months, they're not getting those results. But it's with anything that you do, like whatever you're doing personally, keeping fit and healthy, you're trying to put on weight, you're trying to lose weight, you won't get those results straight away. So you can't give up. You need to put that work and effort in, even if it takes 3 months, 6 months. And even now, people see me still going live. That's because we do things on a consistent basis. It's likely to be remembered, you're consistent with it. And with anything, you just have to keep going as well.
Definitely. No, I totally agree with that. And how are you, from an audience growth? Obviously, we've talked about videos, we've talked about content. How do you manage your grid, as it were? Because, I know there's lots of people that like to have a pretty grid and they like to have that consistency of different things on there. Is there any benefit to that? Or is it just, more of a vanity side of things?
I think there's mixed reviews on this, because some people think, okay, I'll just post anything that I want. It could be an image here or there. It could be like an infographic, a carousel post. And I think it's great to have that because you're being consistent. However, with me, something that I like to do for myself is I like to have an image and then a text-based post. And the reason why I do that is because it's easier for me when it comes to planning. And I always think about when somebody is scrolling through my Instagram feed, it's more pleasing on the eye. And rather than having somebody's images that's sort of all over the place, they might share incredible content. But if they're looking through mine, they think, right, 5 tips on saving time, 5 content ideas. And it's done in such a way that it's like, say somebody looks at one thing, they think, oh, she shared more tips here. And not only is it more aesthetically pleasing on the eye, they're more likely to scroll through. Like, it's personal preference, but I always think having that sort of consistency and aesthetically pleasing grid is so much easier, rather than not a jumble, but yeah, I'd say just random pictures.
It goes back to that making it easy for your audience, I think, as well, doesn't it? Of, what are they interested in? What do they want to learn? What do they want to hear about? And then making it easy for them to navigate through your grid on that.
Hmm. Exactly.
Okay.
And again, it will just save you so much time, because if you know that, say, your next one will be a carousel post, the next one will be an image, it will just reduce that overwhelming feeling because you know exactly what you need.
I was just going to say, it almost goes back to that whole point of planning, doesn't it? So that you've got that in place. One of the other things you touched on was this, obviously, idea of showing behind the scenes and, people buying from people, which is absolutely true. The I think the idea of people sharing their whole lives behind the scenes can scare them as well. But how do you find that balance of having that human connection, being relatable, but still kind of sharing what you want to share, I guess?
It depends on different individuals, because when I start to say share behind the scenes, people instantly think, oh, I don't want to share everything or my entire life. You don't necessarily need to. You need to share what you feel comfortable with sharing. So, for example, for me, a lot of people know that I love getting up at 5 or 6 o'clock. I love going for a morning run. I love going to the gym. I love a good milkshake. Like, they know these parts of me. It's not like they know personally exactly what's going on, but they know enough about me to know those elements and how it links in with my business. So think about your life. Like, what do you enjoy? Maybe you like going for walks. Maybe you like reading. Maybe you like having, I don't know, ice cream in the evenings. It's these things that are memorable, because for me, one thing I love to do is celebrate with an Oreo milkshake, and my audience know and they love that about me. So think about your like individual things, your habits. It's like, what parts do you feel comfortable and confident sharing? Because the more that you do that, those elements will be memorable.
And I guess it almost goes back to your brand, doesn't it? Like, how do you want to show up? What do you want to be remembered for, both personally as well as your actual business and your expertise? And, a really simple way to do this, I guess, is just brainstorming that, just grabbing a piece of paper and going, right, what do I love about me? What do I do?
Yeah.
What's my everyday things? And then almost picking those things that you're happy to share that is relevant for your audience that they can kind of connect with.
And I think it's so important to do that in terms of your business and your brand. And I was actually doing this branding work, and things that came up were love, fun, and authenticity. And I thought, I've been doing these things all over the years. So if I continue to do that, my audience will know and love that about me, like love for family, love for nature, walking whilst having fun and being authentic and real, which is what I'm doing. So if you think back to yourself, like, what elements can you bring, which is memorable to you, but also represents your business and your brand?
Amazing. So many great tips there. And we've talked about kind of the content that we're creating that's on our feed. What about other people? So how do we grow our audience if we're putting content out and that kind of thing? How do people go, okay, I just want more followers. How do I start with that?
I think one of the main things people tend to do is they think of content and they think, right, what do I like? What do I want to share? But then if you flip it and you think about, right, what does my ideal audience want? What do my ideal customers want? What are they struggling with? So if I give you an example right now, people are struggling with, they don't necessarily know how to start using Reels, what to share on stories, what content ideas. So if I start sharing tips and things that are of value, people will not only engage with that content, but they'll share it with other people. So if you think about it that way and what they're struggling with, we like to call it pain points. If you start doing that, you'll start to attract even more individuals, which will organically grow your account. And I continue to do this, whether that's on stories, whether that's on like an infographic or reels. If I start sharing that, other people will say, oh, have you seen Vanisha's tips? Or, you see another account, they're sharing tips on skincare. When people start to see that, they'll easily recommend it and share it with others as well.
Such a good idea. And what about commenting and engaging on other people's posts and feeds? Do you recommend people spend kind of intentional time doing that as well?
I like doing that because if you think about it, if you spend that time doing that yourself, then by the time somebody pulls up their phone, they think, oh, who's this Venetia person? She's commented on a few of my posts. But don't do it in such a way that, oh, I love this. This looks great. Do it like where you're being intentional with it, but you're actually doing it from a point of view where it's like you actually genuinely care, and you're leaving genuine comments whereby you're writing a few sentences how it relates to you, because then you never know who you might end up connecting connecting with, rather than liking a few posts here or there, commented on a few, and then maybe never connected with that person again. Be intentional with that time.
And it's that authenticity again, isn't it? That's kind of come through in a lot of what we've been talking about. I mean, it's amazing the number of times that I'll pick up my phone, go into Instagram, look and see what's kind of the activity with people who have liked. And it's someone who's trying to sell something to me that's gone in and liked the last 10 peak posts
Yeah.
and then has sent me a direct message about something. And I'm just like, no, like
You
build
don't
the
open it.
relationship.
And more often than not, what you'll find is they'll be in your request folder and you just let it sit there, because straight away they're not getting to know you. And I don't know about you, but sometimes you get those messages and they haven't taken the time. It's like when you go to a networking event, you build up that relationship with anyone, and you wouldn't start, go up to somebody at a party. Oh, do you want to buy this? Do you want to buy my lip balm? You just wouldn't do that.
Yeah, definitely. It's that attraction marketing, isn't it? Rather than just pushing yourself onto other people, which, I think when we're first starting out or we're, trying to sell products and services, we can easily get into that sort of mode of, well, I've got to promote what I'm doing. I've got to share all of that. But it is that flipping it on its head and going, actually, people buying from people, why do they want to connect with me? Attracting those right people to you rather than you just pushing. Building that two-way relationship is so key. From a timings perspective, we spoke about it right at the beginning of, creating this boundaries, having that flexibility, this business that kind of works for us. What's your suggested time? And we've talked about creating content and how we can do that, but the actual engagement side of things within social media, what's your sort of recommended time, whether it's per day or per week, that people should be intentionally engaging on other people's grids, other people's feeds?
I think at least 20 to 30 minutes. So again, it goes back to the time that you've got available, looking
Yeah.
at your schedule. But if you work maybe Monday to Friday, maybe spend that time 20 or 30 minutes. And it could just be something as simple as, watching other people's stories and even like messages, because I don't know about you, but I need to have that time where I sit back and I respond to them. And it could be something as simple as sending those voice notes, because what you're doing is you're not only engaging with them, but you're building those relationships. So if you intentionally spend that time, say 10 or 20 minutes, you know that you're doing that maybe on a daily basis, maybe it's every 3 days, but I'd highly recommend having that time set aside. And I've even got that in my calendar where I know, right, there's a 30-minute window. This is what I need to do. So I'm effective and intentional with my time.
Same. I've got it blocked out in my calendar just every
Have
single day so
to.
that you just know that you've got it in there, because quite often messages do come in and you want to respond to them, but if you haven't got that time, and as you say, you need that headspace, because it is about nurturing people. It's about building that relationship. You don't just want to flick a quick one-liner off if it's not meant with anything. So yeah, I think that's a really great point and a really valid point that, people go into social media, they can be intentional about posting on their own stuff, but actually it's that relationship. It's about spending time, and that is growing a business. That is part of you having a business. People need to know you. They need to have that relationship with you before they're going to buy.
And especially with how busy we are now, like, there's so many different elements, especially when it comes to like, keeping fit and healthy, doing things like the food shop, doing like your emails, your admin. And if you pencil that time into your schedule, you know that that block is dedicated to not only engaging with accounts, but you're building those relationships, you're nurturing them as well.
Building on that then, so if we're thinking about using this as a way to build relationships with the assumption that they will buy from us at some point, how do you keep a track of those people that you're having conversations with? Do you keep it as a spreadsheet, or you just kind of have, those people within your Instagram messages or Facebook messages that you just go into and kind of have that conversation with?
So there's two ways that you can do this. In your Instagram, you've actually got I don't know whether you've done this, you've got a primary and general inbox.
Mhm.
In my primary, I try and keep family and friends, but in general, I might have like, say, existing clients, inquiries that have come in. So I've got that separation. And then taking it one step further, I've got a spreadsheet, because I'm sure you agree, it's so hard to keep track of this individual has inquired about the Reels workshop, this one is struggling with content. So at least then, even if they're not an existing client, you can at least give them some tips, give them some advice, and then eventually they might end up saying, how can I work with you on a one-to-one basis? Because it's so hard to keep a track of like all those different individuals that you're speaking to. So number one, having like the two inboxes, having that separation, and then having it on a spreadsheet, or even if you like pen to paper, a notebook notebook, but I don't know about you, but I love having like a spreadsheet and having it all like laid out in that way.
Yeah, and it's easy to move people then from one space to the other, isn't it? Of yeah, no, I love a spreadsheet for all
Saves
sorts
so
of
much
things.
time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, if you're trying to set it up from complete scratch when you've got all of these messages, that can feel quite overwhelming. But it goes back to that planning piece again. Like if you can think the longer term of how actually it can make it a lot easier for you, then that's what it's really all about. And even planning your content, I want to delve back into this just from a spreadsheet perspective as we're talking about them, is that you can create that content, it's saved there, that you can repurpose it, a few months later, if you're talking about a similar thing or you're doing a similar launch, you've got that content already written. So, you're not having to start from scratch each time.
I know. And this is what a lot of people say, thinking, oh, I don't know what to post. Like, where do I start? But if you've already got the content there, why not repurpose it? Like, say, for example, you've got one Instagram post, maybe you can go live, share it onto your email list, share it into a reel, share it as a TikTok. So if you've got one piece of content, you can actually share it 7 different ways. You don't necessarily have to do that the same month. Maybe think of the following month, because then people always think, I've got nothing to post. But if you look at what's already working well or something similar that you're launching, just go back and see what's worked and just repurpose that content.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness, there's been so many tips in here. Hopefully people have got a notebook that they're scribbling things down. If people do want to connect with you, where is the best place to come and find with you and find out even more tips about how and where to show up?
So the best place to come and connect with me is on Instagram. My Instagram handle is I am Vanisha Patel. I'm very active on Instagram.
And that Instagram's your kind of main place as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. I love it.
Amazing. Are there any kind of final tips or words of wisdom that you want to share with our audience?
I think one of the main things I've got to say is make sure you've got a plan in place, because one thing that always comes up is not knowing exactly what to post, when to post, but have that plan in place. So at least then you can post with purpose. And the second thing is something that I've learned is don't feel as though you need to be on every single platform. Because at one point I thought, oh, I need to use Twitter, I need to use Pinterest, I need to use, all these different things. And now at the moment, I'm just focusing on Instagram and Facebook because I know that they're working well. I've got the space, the time, and the capacity to work on those. When I've got more time, maybe I think, right, let me start using TikTok more. Let me start using LinkedIn. And this is where that overwhelming feeling comes in, like, oh, I need to be everywhere. But in actual fact, you don't.
And it goes back to, for me, it's always two things. It's where is your ideal client hanging out the most? And also, where do you feel most comfortable hanging out? Because then you're going to be more consistent. You're going to be comfortable feeling more visible as well. So I love that. Planning is always key to my heart of making life easy for business owners. And I think, that's what it is about. We want to have that flexibility. We want to have that freedom. And so it's finding ways to make life a lot easier, but still be consistent, still be visible, still finding ways to grow your audience and attract the right people to you and nurture them. So yeah, I've loved chatting to you. Thank you so much for sharing so many different tips on different aspects of social media, but I guess more specifically on Instagram and some current trends that are working really well for people. Hopefully you listeners have enjoyed this episode of the Healthy Business Podcast. Feel free to either send myself or Vanisha a direct message as well if you've got any questions. But as always, we would love your comments, your reviews, your feedback on whichever audio platform you're listening to this episode. So I will see you on the next episode. Vanisha, thank you so much for joining me. And to everyone listening, have a wonderful rest of your day.